Good afternoon and welcome to CARE Ratings webinar on power sector. I am Amod Khanorkar, Senior Director of Ratings at CARE, and I head the infrastructure vertical. I'll be host and a moderator for this today's web conference. The topic for the conference is, can the resurgent demand re-energize the thermal generators and the DISCOMs? We have today with us some of the best minds in the industry to deliberate on the subject. I would like to introduce the speakers to all of you. First, we have Mr. P.K. Sinha. Mr. P.K. Sinha is the Executive Director of Power Finance Corporation. He has a 32 years of experience in power sector, of which 28 happen to be with PFC. He has experience across the value chain of power sector, including planning, maintenance, financing of generation, transmission, and distribution segments. In PFC, Mr. Sinha has been playing a key role in business development, project appraisal, financial modeling, project monitoring, and stress asset resolution. He is in charge of PFC's lending operations in Northern region. He also heads lending policy unit in PFC, overseeing the formulation and review of PFC's lending policies. Welcome, Mr. Sinha. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Juvenil Jani. Mr. Jani is a CFO of Sembcorp Energy India Limited. He's a qualified CA, ICWA, and a qualified company secretary. He's also a certified management accountant from Institute of Management Accountants, United States. He has over 30 years of work experience in the areas of finance, structuring of equity and debt funding, governance, taxation, corporate, secretarial, and analytics across various sectors: power, transmission, coal mining, real estate, financial markets, and commodity trading. He joined Sembcorp in the year 2014, and prior to that, he was with Adani Group, where he worked for about 10 years and was CFO of various verticals. He also worked with the Jumbo Group in Dubai and India, Ask Raymond James and Associates, and Concord Freight Systems. Warm welcome to you, Mr. Jani. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Our next speaker is Mr. Banerjee. I believe Mr. Banerjee has not been able to join as yet because of some technical problem at his end. Nonetheless, I'll go ahead and give details of Mr. Banerjee, who is a CFO of BSES Rajdhani Power Limited. He also worked as a CFO of BSES Yamuna Power Limited for about 7 years. Mr. Banerjee is a qualified CA, cost accountant, and a law graduate. He has over 29 years of experience in diverse sectors such as steel, textile, telecom, engineering, and electricity. And then we have with us Mr. Lalit Jain. Mr. Lalit Jain is a President Thermal of MB Power Madhya Pradesh Limited. He has 25 years of rich experience in energy sector, holds extensive experience in power generation, project development, M&A, valuation, and power plant operations. He has worked in multiple geographies: Asia, Europe, North Africa, and Americas. Mr. Jain has experience in hydro, solar, wind, and thermal. In the past, he worked with L&T, CRISIL, El Paso, and in KIPCO Group of Kuwait. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Jain. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you, sir.
Once again, a very warm welcome to all the panelists, and thanks for joining today. My warm welcome to all attendees. Thanks for taking out time to attend our conference this afternoon. Quick remarks from my side before we move on. As all of you are aware, Indian power sector has been going through a very dynamic phase, and I would say even in very interesting phase. The rapidly changing complexion of power generation, it has brought its own set of opportunities and challenges. However, the conventional thermal generators, they have been a bit at a receiving end as far as some of these issues are concerned, and the challenges they have been facing, be it fuel related issues, the availability of that, the availability of long-term selling arrangements, or at times lack of that availability, increasingly a demand related issue. Frankly speaking, whenever you speak of infrastructure in India, and whenever you go to assess the viability of the produce, you never really worried too much about demand. I mean, the demand for the service that would be offered by an infra asset was always sort of always taken for granted, and it was never an issue. Now, increasingly, that's sort of becoming an issue with us having a good amount of capacity across various type of generation classes. So thermal has its a bit of an issue as far as demand is also concerned, and we'll get into details of that. And also the ongoing issue which most of the power generators face today, or whosoever deals in power sector in any manner, the receivables related issue as far as payments from discoms are concerned. And while on the point of discom, the discom, they continue to be, as all of us are aware, the biggest buyer of power in the country. They are in difficult financial position, with exception of possibly a few. Importance of a healthy distribution segment need not be overstated. Government of India has done, and including MOP, they have taken multiple steps, and so also maybe state governments, they have taken multiple steps, and starting way back from 95, 96, when the power sector really opened up in terms of generation. Various legislation, various schemes, various relief measures, latest being the Atmanirbhar package, and these have met with varying degrees of success, possibly not to the extent that it was expected of, and not zilch as well. So the challenges of discoms, they continue, and frankly speaking, unless discoms are in a good shape, good credit shape, fiscal shape, whatever you want to however, or operational shape, till then it's going to be a bit of a challenge for the entire power sector, and so also the state exchequers. So this is the issue we will also debate and deliberate today as to how we see this happen, panning out going forward. We will take the panelist view on these issues. At CARE Ratings, we have a dominant position in infrastructure company rating. The SPVs that we rate in infra space, something like 700 odd companies we rate. Of these 700, 300 belong to power sector. That gives us a benefit of a vantage point, and we are, with humbleness, we can say that we are in a position to get a larger picture and decipher the trends and developments that have been happening in the sector. And that is precisely what we'll try to bring out in today's presentation, which my colleagues will make in some time from now. Once that presentation is over, we'll get into a Q&A with panel, and some of the larger issues on which we would want their thoughts is how do they think the future of thermal will pan out? How do you see the demand panning out? What do you think? What do you make of discoms? Will they be in position to put their act together? What sort of a time frame, and what more needs to be done? These are some of the points we will like to hear from the panelists, and we'll come to the specifics later. In terms of flow today, or in terms of the flow of the event today, my colleague will make a presentation on some of these issues, post which we'll have panel discussion. Subsequent to that, we will throw the discussion open to a Q&A from the audience. I will request now my colleague Sudhir to present the CARE Ratings view. Sudhir is the Director of Infrastructure Ratings at CARE, and he is ably assisted by colleagues Agnimitra and Naresh, who have helped him in putting together this presentation. So Sudhir, maybe you can take us through the findings and through the point of view. So over to you, Sudhir. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Amod, for the introduction. A very good afternoon, friends. Today, myself, Sudhir, I am going to present a brief discussion on various issues which Amod has briefly talked about in its opening remarks. Among the key messages which we want to convey is first of all, with respect to the peak demand. We have seen that the peak demand has peaked out literally in August 2021 with around 200 gigawatt, and this is all-time high and backed by addition of new consumers. With it, the base energy is also showing a very healthy recovery. On a full year basis, the power demand in our expectation is expected to register a growth of around 5%, and this is also expected to improve the PLFs of thermal plant. In our mind, we would be reaching somewhere around 57-58% in terms of PLF for the full year 22. In terms of issue, the delay in the project implementation, and I'm talking particularly about cost plus based tariff based power plants, that would negatively affect the average pooled purchase cost of the DISCOM, and this would thus further strain the already weak financials. FGD, we have got some clarity of late with respect to its recovery, and what remains to be seen is what will be the lender in terms of financial closure. We also expect the merchant rates to be around firming up from here on, at least for the next 6 to 8 months, backed by improved demand in the domestic market. Coming to the sector overview, we have over the last couple of years we have installed a very small number of thermal capacity, but still in the overall scheme of things, among the 382 gigawatts of installed capacity, thermal has a lion's share. This continues to be the mainstay of our both installed capacity as well as renewable capacity. However, the renewable sector that has become has the still the show with the current share of around 25%. In terms of CAGR, the thermal sector have been quite a laggard with 3% growth, while the renewable energy has witnessed a growth of around 15%. Despite the significant capacity addition in the renewable space, thermal had the mainstay for both generation as well as installed capacity over the last 5 years, as evident from the graph also. In terms of power demand and consumption, India sits way behind the large developed economies and even among the emerging economies on a per capita basis. Despite the healthy GDP growth witnessed in terms of per capita consumption, there is still scope for further increase. The further demand is likely to be driven by newly electrified areas and new connection in the recent past through various government reforms. However, base demand, while it is expected to grow, it has been sluggish even before the COVID-19 first wave on account of reducing industrial activity from FY19 onwards. Over the years, we have seen that the base deficit has tapered down to less than 1%, which also puts question mark on the need to add more baseload capacity in the country. However, on the peak demand side, there is a different story, slightly different story, where there is no degrowth even during the COVID-19 period. It has created high peaks, especially during the high consumption months of summers, and as I stated earlier, has touched the peak of around 200 gigawatt. We expect this peak demand to further go up and perhaps touch a peak of 210 by March end. On power generation in PLF, with the rebound in the economy in FY22, and despite the challenges faced during the second wave of COVID, the base demand growth is expected to log a 5% YOY growth, which is also contributed by low base effect. In fact, the base demand is already 15% higher during April 21 to July 21, which is a 4-year period corresponding to the last year, as also evident in the graph below. Given the prospects of healthy demand, better coal availability, and availability of liquidity post PFC REC fund infusion into the DISCOMs, the thermal plants are expected to have higher schedules FY22. We believe that the PLFs will form up in FY22 with a number of around 57-58%. Here, when we discuss power sector, the coal consumption, the coal production, that used to be one of the big issue. But in terms of coal consumptions now, which has already touched its historic high level now, the availability related issues are relatively low, or I don't know if I may use the word non-existent. But the development with respect to higher power demand has struck relatively quicker than the ramping up of coal production and transportation in the recent time, where there is a slight lag. As a result, inventory levels of thermal power plants have come down. Further, the coal prices, as indicated by National Coal Index for non-coking coal mid-range GCV, it has gone up from around 100 to 112 in just 6 months. It ended June 21, indicating the firmness in the non-coking coal prices, that is thermal coal prices. We believe coal availability, leaving apart seasonal hiccups, to be fairly adequate for the balance part of the year. For FY22, we do not see any additional volumes to be much of a challenge for Coal India, given the historical high levels achieved by it in FY19. On the issue of merchant prices, during the last 9 quarters, merchant rates have declined to around 2.35 unit per unit during Q1 21, lowest since April 17, when the COVID pandemic struck and major economic activities came to a standstill. Gradual resumption of the energy demand led to firming up of the merchant rates close to pre-COVID levels. Merchant volumes and rates are sensitive to peak power demand, which is driven by climatic conditions affecting the domestic category consumptions, availability of power from peak load operating stations, among others. We believe that the recovery in power demand is expected to firm up the prices in merchant power market in short term. Coming to the DISCOM side of the presentation, a discussion on any segment of power value chain would be incomplete without discussion on power distribution companies, which are often called the wallet of the sector. While many of these state DISCOMs have availed the liquidity infusion funds under Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, a brief analysis of data available on Prapti portal suggests that overdue position of few of the larger states have either not improved or has deteriorated over the previous year. Interestingly, also as evident from the graph which is on the screen, Maharashtra has the highest overdues among the states, and its position is further moderating year on year. Karnataka, which also used to be one of the better states, has also deteriorated over the past 2 years in terms of overdue position. Coming to the key risk in the sector today, in our experience as one of the rating agencies with substantial coverage in the sector, we are seeing these issues which may impact the sector in the medium term. We will be covering all these issues in details over the subsequent few slides. Among them, the first issue is the delayed implementation. The project implementation in the thermal sector has been facing challenges from both pre-commissioning to post-commissioning. These challenges include issues with the contractor litigations, timely receipt of approval, financial closure, and thus leading to the time overrun. If we see the 40 gigawatt of stressed assets identified in the parliamentary committee in 2018, majority of the capacity encountered the pre-commissioning hurdles. The other reasons like the lack of PPA, tepid power demand, plus the receivable issues of the DISCOM have made the further investment in the thermal assets look riskier. Further, the shift of capital towards ESG businesses, compliance of environmental retrofits, regulatory issues, and the must-run status of renewable have further posed challenges to the thermal power sector. India has been achieving well below the planned thermal capacity addition since FY17, and the private sector has waned out in terms of interest during the financial year 13 to 16 year period. Coming to the first issue which we want to highlight and draw the attention of the audience, despite the implementation issue which I just enumerated, there is a significant share of thermal capacity which is still under active implementation today. These assets are being largely developed by the central and state sector, who have cost plus tariff and relatively better track record in terms of fund mobilization. Out of the 31 gigawatt of capacity which is under active implementation, around 35% of capacity is facing time overruns of more than 2.5 years, and including 16% of capacity which has got more than 5 years in terms of overrun. Further analysis of this 16%, which is around 5 gigawatt capacity which is under implementation, it reveals that majority of these projects will be supplying power to financially weaker DISCOM of southern India, which is AP, Telangana or Tamil Nadu, and they would be also supplying to east, which is Jharkhand, Bihar, West Bengal and Odisha. Due to this time over, the capital cost per megawatt is substantially higher for them, and they are around upwards of 9 crore per megawatt. And this cost, because of the cost plus nature, which eventually be passed on to the DISCOM over the period of time. If the power demand continues to be low for these DISCOM, this high cost plant may also not have got higher scheduling made available to them. There is a probability that these plants may keep billing high capacity charges, and which will eventually deteriorate the average power purchase cost of these DISCOM. All these DISCOMs highlighted are loss making with high ACS ARR gap, and hence collection of dues by the generation companies is expected to be the challenge going forward, which are serving these distribution companies. Moving to the next issue, which is around FGD implementation. Government of India has identified around 442 thermal plants for FGD implementation with aggregate capacity of around 170 gigawatt spread under state, central, and private IPPs. The total capex for the FGD implementation is expected to be around a lakh crore rupees, with per megawatt capex ranging from 50 lakhs to 1 crore. While there has been little progress in FGD installation, with only 6 plants having aggregate capacity of 2.2 gigawatt completing installation in as on August 2021. A good 78% of the capacity of the plant have already invited tenders and are expected to commission over the next 2 years. Based on the location and the extent of population in the vicinity of the plant, MOAF in its March 21 guidelines relaxed the timelines for the compliance till December 22, December 23, and December 24. Like every capex, this FGD implementation would also entail an increase in tariff for DISCOM thermal power bucket by around 24 paisa per unit, while its impact on the overall DISCOM BPPC is expected to be around 5 to 10 paisa per unit. And this is when we believe that all the cost would be allowed to be recovered from the distribution companies by the generation company. In this context, it would be pertinent to talk about recent discussion by forum of regulators who have suggested on utilization of accumulated clean energy cess funds to the DISCOM, such that higher tariff on account of FGD is not passed on to the power consumers. In this webinar, we would also ask our distinguished panelists with respect to what are their thoughts on the applicability or the approvability of these suggestion made by forum of regulators. Coming to the major issue which concerns the power generators even today, even after Atmanirbhar Bharat, is the DISCOM challenge. In the past, we have been seeing that in a month, the DISCOM have rarely pay the billed amount in full. Regular collection of monthly bills provide a lot of comfort to the generating company for managing its liquidity. In the last 3 years, there have been few occasions where the collections have exceeded the monthly billing. If we have to break down the total payment made by the DISCOM in a particular month for settlement of firstly the overdue and secondly the current dues, we observe that most of the payment from the DISCOM has been towards settlement of the overdues. In fact, the share of current due settlement through the payout for the month is decreasing. This is leading to slippage of current dues to the overdues. So unless the structural issues of DISCOM are addressed, we see accumulation of overdue as the next big issue in the DISCOM in next 12 to 18 months, unless arrested by some government intervention, that may be by way of a scheme or some other reform measure. While we have discussed various issues concerning the sector, on the positive side, we are aware that government is seized of the matter and recognizes the stress in the sector. It has been coming out with various policies to support the sector in multiple instances earlier, whether it is Shakti scheme for coal, pilot scheme 1 and 2 for partially addressing the PPA issue or its absence, or Uday and Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme for the DISCOMs. GOI is also trying to address few of the uncertainties through proposed Electricity Act amendment, which is awaiting Union Cabinet approval and is likely to be taken up in the winter session of the Parliament. The same would take care of few of the issues concerning the sector, with establishment of electricity contract enforcement authority, introduction of distribution sub-licenses, a DBT in the power sector, among others. However, its acceptability and approval in its original form remains to be seen. All in all, we believe that given the baseload requirements, the thermal sector would continue to be playing an important piece in the overall Indian energy mix. While its share in the overall generation is expected to be declining in coming decades, also corroborated by the CA study, we believe it would still be a relevant cog in the overall wheel. With this, I end my presentation and hand it over to Amod for further proceedings. Over to you, Amod, and thank you.
Sorry. Thanks, Sudhir. That was a wonderful presentation, bringing out the issues which we then want the panelists to sort of debate and comment upon. Without much ado, I would not take any more time. I'm sure the audience is keen to hear the panelists who have assembled here today, and we will actually now get into the panel discussion. I'm also glad to inform that Mr. Banerjee has been able to join. Good afternoon, Mr. Banerjee, and welcome to this event. Thanks for joining. With that, we'll get into the Q&A in the panel discussion. My first question is to Mr. Sinha of Power Finance Corporation. Mr. Sinha, despite massive renewable push, we still see that good amount of capacity, both by central players and state entities. They are going ahead with the greenfield capex on the thermal side to add more capacity. As we saw in the presentation, a good amount of this capacity is running behind in terms of time and cost overruns. As a lender, do you see these issues then impacting the viability of the asset in terms of, especially in light of subdued demand? That's one. Second is higher delivered price due to these overruns, and then you have to compete with the renewable tariffs, which seem to be only sort of coming down over a period of time. So how do you see these assets panning out, their viability? That is something that I thought we would like to hear from you, Mr. Sinha.
Thank you, Amod. Of course, the thermal capacity addition is becoming challenge day by day, what we see, and many of the financial institutions have are not considering funding any new capacities. In fact, in case of thermal case, with the time overrun, certainly there is an which impacts the project viability, and it certainly has an effect. We have seen in the past also that number of projects had become NPA because of this, because of the coal block deallocation. Many of our projects became NPA because of viability issue, and they are still not yet resolved. We still have around, as you know, that around 40 gigawatt of stressed asset in thermal. But there is a challenge to have an efficient power plant, thermal power plant, with this tariff regime going down to say 2 rupees. It certainly gives a thought to all these discoms to look into their PPAs. And my friend from BSES is here. Recently, they were news when they moved out of NTPC Dadri project. It was a great news. And instead of renegotiating those things, so this it is going to, the tariff regime which is coming down is impacting the viability of the thermal plants, and the discoms also. They don't want to buy power from costly power from the thermal power plants if they are not efficient. They need to be efficient, and the economical power plant will be required. Generation would be required. Then only they can go for this thermal power plants. But and of course, as Mr. Sudhir was telling, that the outstanding use of thermal power plants, it's mounting in many of these state discoms. So that is also an area of concern for our lenders, that many of these GENCOs which we had funded not only the private projects, but the state utilities, the state generation companies that we have funded. They are under crisis every time because discoms are not paying them on time. This is a challenge that will be there in thermal projects, and we'll have to do it. But yes, as long as we need a project for a base load thermal power plants, we are of the view that yes, it has a good, there has to be there. And recently, I was interacting in one of the meeting, and there it was being discussed that thermal power plants may be considered as a flexible operation. And my thought was that flexible operation is not the solution. If I give a blanket up, government gives a blanket approval to all the companies to work the thermal power plant on flexible operation, the O&M cost will go up. The maintenance, and there will be more wear and tear if we do a flexible generation in thermal plant. It has to be a base load project. So those projects which are not we need to identify the thermal power plants. The state utilities need to, GENCOs need to identify thermal power plants which can be operated on flexible and make arrangements for that. This is my view. And those which can be run on a base load, they should be kept separate. And second point that I wanted to make here was that the PLF issue which is coming up in many of the thermal power plants, that the power plants are having lower PLFs and all. So PLF issue can be improved if we retire the old thermal power plant units in a power plant. It can take care of the old inefficient units needs to be retired, and a new, instead of, in place of those new efficient units needs to be installed. This will have a better impact. There will be more efficiency, and the PLF of the power plant will improve. We can fund such projects. We can certainly consider working it out. Thank you.
So true. I mean, while the lure of renewable seems to be too strong to resist that temptation, but the fact remains that generation profile of renewable assets, either during the day, during the season, that is something which is not yet to the desirable levels in terms of generation during the day, and possibly evenings you'll have some of the wind related generation, and then you have the whole load to take care of, during which thermal will have to sort of step in. And then the aspect of efficient operations, flexible operations, some of those things will matter. But and then frankly speaking, till you have the storage related issues totally addressed and worked out, the importance of thermal that sort of will continue. And that's what we thought. As you saw also in the presentation, even in 2030, the CEA own estimates or study, the offtake from thermal plants in terms of energy is something to the tune of something like 50%. So with that sort of a share in the pie, possibly, I don't know. I mean, how the renewables have must-run status, renewables have payment priorities, and so on. Whereas your thermal, they are still your bread and butter as far as your energy intake is concerned, as far from a security point of view. So we also agree that the importance of a thermal in the scheme of things cannot be really looked away or shied away in that sense. Of course, the aspect of ESG environment, and you touched upon a point that some funds don't want to touch anymore the conventional sources in terms of a pollution and so on. But frankly speaking, if you see the way say automobile industry evolved over a period of time in terms of its own pollution norms, I'm sure thermal also will keep on only improving in terms of what they emit out and so on. So point well taken, Mr. Sinha. Thanks for that. And then I'll come to Mr. Jani on the same point in somewhat different manner. Mr. Jani, my question to you is you are present currently in both conventional thermal and renewable. Of course, I think renewable you separated out in India in terms of a legal entity, but you are present otherwise in both in thermal and renewable. So how do you read future? How relevant do you think, in your opinion, thermal will be in terms of capacity in light of renewable? So also nuclear capacity additions, battery storage will come, and some of those things. So how do you see future of a thermal vis-a-vis renewable If you can comment on that.
Thank you, Amod. In fact, I will. It all goes back to what is going to be the power demand in the country, and maybe just a couple of seconds on that. So the government has put a solid thrust on the electrification, or rather the consumption of electricity for various things. Including transport and for industry, which is which is gathering a lot of pace. Just to add that a lot of infrastructure and transport projects such as metro trains, bullet train project, conversion of transport trucks into electric trucks, dedicated corridor on the national highways for electric vehicles, and even a thrust on having a lot of passenger vehicles running on electric power. Uh, to add to this, the solid pace at which digitization is moving in the country. So, if one were to just take an example, UPI transactions a few years back, when it was introduced, was hardly anything. And look at the compounded growth rate. I think high double-digit growth rates annually. So all these things requires a lot of power. 100% electrification, or near about every household having electric power. The consumption of uh, consumers wanting more gadgets with them. All this will substantially improve the consumption of electricity, which as Mr. Sinha alluded to, there would be, and of course Sudhir did mention in his presentation, so there is going to be a big rise in the base load power capacity requirement. And to add to this, there is one significant thing which will come out of this proposed Electricity Amendment Act is when they allow competition in the various distribution circles, there will be more discoms in each circle, but it's not that they'll be splitting the same pie. In fact, there will be I don't want to hazard a guess on figures, but it will be a quantum jump in the electricity supply and consumption, because today, whilst we say that supply is exceeding demand, but really, is it so? We see a lot of cities and states. Gurgaon, for example, has a lot of the commercial buildings where the full-time power supply is through diesel generators. We have seen that in quite a few other states also, where there is non-perennial availability of electric power, and people resort to either diesel generators, or there are simply power cuts, especially in the hinterland. Now, the moment there are private or maybe other distribution companies in the same circle, they will sense this opportunity, and then they will uh, cater to everyone with a 24/7 power, just the way it is happening in the cities of Delhi or Bombay or maybe Ahmedabad, Surat, Calcutta, where round the clock stable power is available. People have virtually forgotten about voltage stabilizers in the cities. And when the new discoms will come into play, they will be very happy to tie up PPAs, because they would not want to run their distribution business fully on merchant market, because it can go anywhere, merchant market. So, and plus in terms of the regulation, so yesterday the Honorable Power Minister also announced forum whereby compliance checks would be done on the discoms as well as the regulators. Now the discoms also have an obligation to tie up a certain minimum percentage of their power through long-term PPAs. So this franchises also resort to long-term PPAs, and then there will be more PPAs hopefully that should be available in the market. And we see also taking that point from Mr. Sinha, that the older plants, so the ones I can say maybe the ones which have completed 20-25 years of their life, they would rather go for an accelerated retirement rather than implement an FGD, because they may not be able to recover the full cost of the FGD in the remaining years of the plant. And some of them are very old subcritical conventional plants of much smaller capacity, compared to the other thermal plants which are mostly supercritical, or even if it is subcritical but with higher megawatt capacity per turbine. So this will continue, and they will see an increase in the base load. So our view on this, and I'll cover the other points before I again come back to the thermal, is so renewables growth is there, and it will certainly in some ways complement the requirement of the total power requirement in the country, but we also have to be cognizant that for renewables to be equal to the thermal baseload requirement, they have to install a capacity which could be anything between 3 to 5x. So, for example, a 10 megawatt turbine or 10 megawatt of or 100 megawatt of renewable power capacity is not equivalent to 100 megawatt of thermal capacity. So to equate a thermal capacity, they have to be 3 to 5 times in that size. Plus, they require battery storage because of or some other sort of hydro storage or some other thing to be really supplying round the clock power. And so renewable growth will certainly be there, but it will have to be balanced out with more storage, because otherwise it will destabilize the grid. And what that means is that thermal again will probably not go out of fashion. The government recognizes this also. Nuclear power, you covered that. That's been so today in the private sector, there's no nuclear power plant which is being set up, but the government also understands that this is a non-polluting fuel. And India, over the period of years, has developed enough, I would say, uranium enrichment capacity for the fission, heavy water for the reactors, and even cadmium rods that are required for controlling the nuclear fission. So all these things are there, but the reactor technology is still required to be imported. So when India has come out with a target of about setting up about 15 gigawatts of new nuclear capacity in the next 10 years, it means that nuclear capacity addition would be on an average just about 1.5 gigawatts per annum, which is far lesser than what the increase in the power demand would require. And plus, whatever India is doing is right. So it's not to say that we should go overboard on in terms of nuclear power capacity, because we are learning out of the ill-fated experiences of US in the 3 Mile Island disaster or Chernobyl disaster from Russia, which has been decades old. But I think so. Nuclear capacity will still, in our understanding, not pose a very big or significant challenge for thermal. And I think gas is at a very low level, so we don't see really gas capacity being coming up significantly. On the last point that you mentioned about battery storage, so battery storage, well, a few tenders on the renewable side have been announced on round-the-clock basis with either storage or some sort of what I would say facility that there can be round-the-clock supply of power. But again, we suspect there is going to be whatever it is, lithium batteries or pumped hydro will still be disrupted with newer technologies. We read about a few months back that Bill Gates and General Electric and Hitachi had invested in a technology which has already commercially started producing power, although on a small scale, with a reactor based on molten salt. The battery storage based on molten salt, and sodium being used for the reactors. So I feel it will be many years ahead, at least in my guess, whatever thermal capacity is there, and net of the retirements would continue to probably run for the full life of the asset. And maybe the government recognizes this, and that's why there has been some new plantings, which the private sector is not doing, but the government wants to do. Sorry for that long one, but I think
So it's pretty interesting. Thanks for your reply, Mr. Jani, and in a couple of points that you made in terms of the new sort of loads that will kick in and that will start demanding more and more power. I think that is frankly speaking so true, and then possibly that's also a reason as to why in 2030 you still see thermal supplying so much, and then possibly pie only has increased. Maybe the more of the pie will be eaten by renewables, but thermal also sort of increases. You made a point on a gas, and then frankly speaking, availability has been an issue. Otherwise, it's a good source. I think pretty efficient, less polluting, quick ramping. Unfortunately, we didn't have very good experience in terms of availability of gas for the thermal gas based generators to sort of run. So valid point. And last point that you made in terms of technologies, I'm sure, I mean, so many technologies that are sort of being right now worked on and worked upon, which ultimately turns out to be commercially acceptable and sustainable, both in terms of commerce as well as ecology and environment, is something that will be only time will tell. But thanks a lot for your reply. I'll come to Mr. Jain of MB Power. So, I had this question, and it's a related question to what Mr. Sinha mentioned in terms of flexible operation of a power plant, a thermal plant. Can we think of something like two-shift operation of a thermal plant? Is that technically feasible? Does it make sense? Because we know something like 7 to 8 hours of a time that you will require for a thermal plant to sort of come to a full load and so on. So can you ramp it up quickly and ramp it down quickly? How easy you think in your operation it is going to be, considering the investments that you make, capital investments that you make, what sort of an impact it will have on a cost structure and so on. So if you can comment a bit on that would be nice.
Thanks, Amod. Let me answer the question. Let me first comment on some of the discussion which has taken place. Let me first share views on those. I think there are three key things which we saw in last 3-4 months. The first headline which we saw was power demand hitting 200 gigawatt. Second key headline which we saw was renewable capacity hitting 100 gigawatt. And third thing which we saw was merchant tariff hitting 20 rupees. Now, how do we make sense of all this together? I think that's the crux of how we see merchant market, how do we see thermal capacity sustaining in future, and what do we do to prepare ourselves for flexible operations. I think in over last 3-4 years, what has happened while capacity has been augmented, most of the new capacity has come from renewable. I believe in last 4 years around 40 gigawatt of renewable capacity was set up, but thermal capacity addition was only 16 gigawatt. So while demand increased by 40 gigawatt, because thermal increase was only 16 gigawatt, we are seeing significant shortfall. And that led to increased merchant prices in April, May, and June period. Of late, imported coal prices have significantly increased. I think imported coal is costing now 1.5 rupees to 1.6 rupees. I think Sembcorp would be able to comment more on that. But because of that, significant capacity based upon imported coal is not able to contribute to the extent it should be contributing right now. This has led to significant increase in energy prices in July and August. So the recent increases which we are seeing is not mainly because of demand, it's also because of supply constraint arising from high imported coal price. So while post-COVID, we did see demand increases in April, May, June period leading to increased pricing. The current pricing may not be sustainable, but the pricing of, let's say RTC pricing of 4 to 5 rupees, we definitely see would sustain in next 6 to 9 months. As a result, what is happening now is we are seeing, it's not desirable, but consumer behavior is often governed by the pricing in merchant market. So the long-term and medium-term decisions are also guided by what's happening in the short-term market. While short-term market volumes are only 5%, they are prone to small variations in demand and supply. But because of this, we are seeing a significant number of medium-term PPAs by utilities, by end consumers. And we have also, after a long time, seen a long-term PPA bid being invited by utility. Apart from that, there are some RTC tenders which Mr. Jani was mentioning. So we see, because of high short-term pricing, utilities wanting to get into medium-term to long-term PPAs. I think it's a fact that renewable energy is not dispatchable at will. It comes when wind blows or when sun shines, and as such, it's not providing a reliable power. And that's one of the reasons why SECI is not able to sign too many PSAs. So we believe that for next 5 to 7 years, I think thermal is going to do well. We believe that only once battery storage pricing is reasonable, then only renewable would become a dispatchable source of power, and that's when thermal may face some challenge from renewable. However, as you rightly mentioned, because of solar coming in large volumes, there is need for flexible operations. We are looking at some of these options. We believe, I think we would need to implement this in next 4 to 5 years. Right now, we do have provisions of technical minimum load, which utilities adhere to. But beyond that, we are currently looking at certain change in the control systems to ensure that we are able to ramp up and ramp down faster. But there is a limit to what can be done. We would need some more hydro capacity because that's much more fast reacting. But I think what has happened in the last 7-8 years, not much new capacity has been developed. There are no thermal plants being developed, practically no thermal plants being developed in private sector, no new hydro plants being developed. So I don't know how renewable energy would find sufficient hydro capacity to balance itself. So this is going to remain a challenge. I think to expect thermal to absorb all the variability of renewable, I think that's not fair or not maybe possible. But I think to a limited extent, we are looking at higher ramp up and ramp down rates.
So that well made all the points, Mr. Jain, and you made a point that possibly now the DISCOMs are looking for considering the firmness in the prices to get into at least if not very long term, at least medium type of contracts, and that possibly is something. And then second point in terms of a flexible operations to the extent that you are possibly able to improve on that and then cut down both your ramp up ramp down time and it's frankly speaking augurs well for a thermal generations. So thanks for that. And then I had then a related question to Mr. Banerjee in terms of we are not really seen for a long time the long term PPAs really coming to market and in fact the 3-year medium-term PPA under Pilot 1 and a Pilot 2 scheme, they also faced difficulty in finding buyers. So do you see this as a issue of low demand, or it's sort of a catching up to sort of a reducing renewable tariffs in an effort of a DISCOM to lower their overall power procurement cost? Otherwise, how would you really explain such a long wait and watch behavior from the DISCOM side? So if you can comment on that in terms of contracts really not sort of coming out, bids not coming out, the pilot schemes and so on.
Sir, typically in case of BSES Rajdhani, good afternoon everybody.
Good afternoon.
In case of BSES Rajdhani, we have sufficient long-term power PPAs, and futuristically it was already taken care of, keeping in mind the future demand pattern. One more problem which we face in Delhi is that the volatility, the seasonal volatility in demand is very high. So we pay fixed cost all the year round, but we schedule power for a very short part of the year. No one indemnifies me for that. But one more aspect which has parallelly come into stream is that which is very essential, of course, as Mr. Jani touched at in very good detail. Renewables have to be included in my basket. As of now, 19% renewable I must buy in my total energy basket in a year. So for that, sufficient capacities have come up, and I'm very thankful for all stakeholders for being instrumental in reducing the tariffs drastically. Our first PPA of renewable, that is at 5 rupee 50 paisa, and the subsequent ones, wind and solar, they are all in the range of 2.5 to 3.25. The central value may be about 2.8. So this will augur well in times to come for the consumers of Delhi. Many of you who are present here are consumers of Delhi and my esteemed consumers. So the phasing out of thermal power will be replaced by RPO, and it is clean energy, green energy. So that's the way forward, and we should look at a much larger picture. Sir, when we were young, we read geography, and there were two places called Arctic and Antarctic. By the time we have our children going old, these two places may have melted off. Well, these two places won't melt off alone. There is another place almost as big as either of these two, which is the Himalayas. So the water towers of Asia are the Himalayas. So a large population of the world stays in Asia, which is fed by the glaciers of the Himalayas and the ecosystem which is supported by the Himalayas, causing sufficient waterfall and rivers which are rain-fed as well as snow-fed, which are the perennial rivers. So these river systems are very critical. So we might see one phrase I recall always. There was one oil minister of Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Ahmad Zaki Yamini. A famous quote he had is that the Stone Age did not end due to lack of stone, and the oil age will end long before the world runs out of oil. Keeping the sense that he wanted to make there, we see that thermal is phasing out. Many of the people who deploy FGDs will not be able to recover the cost. So we are living in very interesting times, tipping point, I would say, Malcolm Gladwell. So until we take cognizance of all these aspects, perhaps we will have a very good economy, but we don't have a planet in which to run those economies. So some sacrifices will be required from all sectors so that we have a ecologically sustainable system going. And nuclear may be the future. Thermal may phase out, going out, and thermal will have to close before coal comes to an end.
And absolutely,
and one more thing is that this FGD, RPO, these are all essential, but they may also be costly. But we as DISCOMs, we don't get tariff orders on time. The suo moto order given by APTEL in 11/11/11, that said the tariff orders must be pronounced on time, but that sentiment remains, but action on the ground is scant. It hurts all of us.
Fair enough. And the point that you made in terms of the issues and the challenges of increasingly the challenges of running fossil fuel based assets, while I think that reality is not escaped to anyone. You really cannot wish away the thermal sources and their need and importance, and a balanced approach to both over a period of time is something that all of us will have to sort of to work with increasing reliance on non-polluting sources. So point well taken, Mr. Banerjee. You also made a point in terms of your own requirement being extremely seasonal, and that sort of creates an issue in terms of procurement, planning, and so on.
Sir, RPO obligations we have fully met.
On FGD, that assets will not be in a position to sort of recover FGD, but those assets who have a long-term PPAs signed and which permit a change of law, I believe over there at least the FGD cost recovery should not be a problem. Is what we thought as an agency. The assets which are open in the market in terms of merchant capacities possibly will have a bit of a issue around that. But good points, Mr. Banerjee. Thanks for that. The aspect of RPO and maybe that number only will sort of increase. So frankly speaking, we had a very good discussion, and I wanted to ask more questions. I mean, in a way I have only had run through only one round of questions, with all the panelists, but we are almost at the end of the webinar. We scheduled it till 5 o'clock. So, and we still have to do a Q&A with the audience. I'm sure they want to ask some questions. So maybe, one common question that I would like to ask all of you, and then you, if you deem fit, you may answer that. The point being, I wanted a view from each one of you in terms of AT&C losses. In FY20, around 2020, we had the AT&C losses in the region of something like 21% or 21.6% or so on a national basis, on a blended all India average. I wanted your sense in terms of all the efforts that all stakeholders are taking. Where do you think that this number will possibly move in the coming 5 years? By 2026, how much drop you think in AT&C losses you think we as a country will be in a position to achieve? Because that ultimately remains an extremely crucial number for well-being of all people involved here. I mean, this way or that way, it comes back and impacts us. So I'll request with and I'll start with Mr. Sinha, and then we will go around the table.
Well, in next 5 years, we can expect AT&C losses less than 15%. This is what is being targeted. As we all are aware that recently in the last budget, Honorable Finance Minister has worked out, stated that 3,03,000 crores for revamped distribution scheme, which is coming up, and we have started working on it. It eyes on one of the criteria is that the AT&C losses has to come in the range of 12 to 15%. That is one of that is there, and that is how the funds will flow. All this. Okay. So we are working on it, and I look forward to that.
Excellent. I mean, so 15% is what Mr. Sinha says. Mr. Jani, I'll come to you. And what's your sense? What do you think?
So one of the things is, so I don't want to mention any percentages because Mr. Sinha has already covered that. But I think the critical part of reducing the AT&C losses is ensuring electronic metering is installed at with all the. This is in our view, this is one very important aspect to control AT&C losses, because today AT&C losses includes basically each and every sort of loss which they can't appropriate or allocate anywhere. All goes into AT&C, including in some places even power theft is also pushed into AT&C losses. And we are not talking too much about the city discoms, but more in the states which are where the discom is very spread out. And the other portion is the transfer of so essentially what the state governments do is they use the discoms as a bank, because they pass on subsidy for, say, either to farmers or other things in the nature of subsidized power, but don't pay the discoms on time. So that in turn results in the discoms delaying payment to the IPPs. So this innovative thing of DBT or direct benefit transfer, which has worked so well in the case of gas cylinders, where the money is directly deposited into the bank accounts of the below poverty line people or the people who are eligible to receive that. Whereas the gas distribution companies, they supply the gas cylinders at market prices. So if this is done, the discom is taken out of the government clutches of subsidizing or its value chain of transferring subsidies, and that will make the discoms also more healthier. They will be able to focus. They will have the funds to focus on reducing AT&C losses. So sometimes what happens is, anyway, by the way, my genuine AT&C losses also gets covered under the subsidized power to the farmers or whatever overdrawn power by the farmer and everything. So I as probably a discom would also pay less attention to that. Okay, if money is not coming, say, from financial institutions, anyway, I will at some point of time get a state government guarantee because they haven't given me the subsidy. So I'll use that guarantee to again go back to PFC, REC and get some more funding or something like that. So in my view, not exactly on the percentage, but these are the couple of very critical points for ensuring that AT&C losses are brought down within the stipulated period. In fact, they can be even lower, provided the work is done in the right direction.
Sure. So I think very interesting point. While you very cleverly have refused to put a number to that, but important points that you raised in terms of a DBT, and then the fact that possibly discoms also act as an arm of government in terms of achieving its economic objective. in that sense. So that's so true. So let me then come to Mr. Jain and ask him his view on the same issue,
Right.
please.
Yeah. So I think in my view, it to a large extent also depends upon how the Electricity Act amendment is passed, when it is passed, and how it is implemented. If we see competition in the distribution sector, where content and carriage, for want of better word, let me say segregation of content and carriage in electricity business, if it happens and private players come in, I think AT&C reduction would happen at faster pace, and maybe the target of 15-16% may be possible in 5 to 7 years. If it were not to happen, and we were to see the as is situation, I believe that we may not be able to achieve the targeted reduction of 15%. As Mr. Jani said, DISCOMs are politically influenced as far as where the subsidies flow and how the losses are computed. So I believe if no such amendment comes through, competition doesn't come in, we might still see AT&C losses of 17 to 18%.
Well put. I can't agree more. But the point also remains, Mr. Jain, is this, that the willingness of a private sector to really get into a distribution in a big way. I mean, there were at times, the legislative hurdles, but I think they have been sort of done away. But we really didn't see too much of an interest from a private sector into a distribution. But for say a couple of city-centric and a few franchises, and now the union territory experiment. But otherwise, they really, I mean, the willingness and the possibly the effort that it will require for them to make a success over there. But otherwise, if they get there, you say segregate the carriage and content and so on, then those numbers will look really good. The interest has not been there as much because of the all related issues, including how you deal with those theft and things like that.
I agree with you, Amod sir, but I think when this amendment comes in and the sector gets open, I think as a private sector, we would like to go after the better geographical regions, which is obviously the urban centers. But I think there are so many urban centers which can still see competition and improvement, that the reductions from as is condition of 17 to 18% to 15% is definitely feasible. But if you were not to happen, then I think these targets are ambitious. As we get lower and lower on AT&C, the reductions would be harder to come by.
I couldn't agree more. That is so true. Every percentage point, and you'll have to sweat out everything so much. Thanks a lot for that, Mr. Jain. And let me come last to the practitioner himself in the AT&C arena, Mr. Banerjee. What do you make of a all India blended tariff, not tariff, AT&C number 5 years from now? How do you see that? What do you think we will be as a nation? Where will we be?
Sir, we are a proud nation which has come a long way. And speaking of my company in which I am employed, BRP ABSS Rajdhani Power Limited, the T&D loss level achieved in 21, financial year ended 21, was 7.1%. AT&C loss about 7.98. Now coming to the national AT&C loss expectation in 5 years, sir, as Mr. Jani just now said, that if DBT is introduced, then the subsidy funding will become real time, and the DISCOM is being treated as a deferred banking system, that mischief will go away. So that will attract a lot of funding into the sector. As long as sincerity and transparency does not come in, funds will shy away. And and then very recently on 17th August, MOP notification has come that smart meters are compulsorily to be deployed by every DISCOM per consumer. Wherever AT&C loss levels are more than 15%, they have to be in place within maybe December 23. And wherever it is less than 15%, that has to be put in place by 25. So if smart metering comes in, many other things will also follow. theft will
Okay.
perhaps reduce. It will go away actually. Then other parameters can be monitored, and time of day metering can be also enabled. Many other data collection facilities are also perhaps possible. And coming to the AT&C loss of the nation, sir, actually so many things are happening together. Like it happened in telecom, privatization succeeded because many things happened together. So if the ecosystem is appropriately supported, then private initiative comes into the distribution sector also in a significant way. Then AT&C in 5 years will be somewhere around 12% in the country.
Okay. Okay. No, that's a very strong number to put out and put your neck out on that, and I'm very glad to hear that. It's only Mr. Jani who refused to put out a number there, but
I was
Mr.
drawing on
Banerjee,
the
you might.
number of Mr. Sinha, so I relied on his number, and I agree with his number.
No, it's in a light vein. But Mr. Banerjee, thanks for your answer. We can't agree more on a DBT, and then a DBT in a gas. It happened, and gas connections, fertilizer they're talking of. I don't know where exactly it is. If it comes into this, certainly yes. Smart meters, we can't agree more. The moment they are there, you know how it will help. And these things have been spoken over a period of time. Some of these things happened, some of them not happened, and that's why a bit of this anxiety as to how much some of these things will really pan out. But if they happen, and then you say possibly we'll see a number of 12%. So we have the whole spectrum. Possibly, Mr. Sinha said 15%. Mr. Jani sort of concurs with him. 70 to 18%. Mr. Jain said. If things don't work out, and then 12% is what Mr. Banerjee. So good spread, and all of us who work in this sector and who have worked enough in this sector would really want to see that number coming down. It's for the good of nation, frankly speaking. I mean, all of us are fully cognizant of that. I'm thankful to each one of you, Mr. Sinha, Mr. Banerjee, Mr. Jani, and Mr. Jain, for agreeing and taking out time for this panel discussion. I'll throw very quickly this open to the audience in terms of any questions if they want to ask. There's a window in the panel by the side to key in your questions. We'll wait for maybe 5-10 seconds for the panel, for the attendees to key in their questions. And while we are running out of time, a couple of questions we can certainly take. So Sudhir, can you take care of that, please?
Yeah, I think I already have a couple of questions from the audience.
Yes.
So I think largely are to Mr. Sinha. So I would take first question, which is from Mr. Manoj Kumar. He's saying that PFC was the nodal agency for setting up various UMPPs in the past. So do PFC have any such plans for setting up UMPPs on thermal or renewable power? That is his first question. And then the second question, I don't know if Mr. Sinha can answer, is with respect to, is PFC also reducing their funding cost due to low MCLR?
Yeah.
So two questions to you, Mr. Sinha.
Yeah, the first part, that development of UMPPs, we are still working on many of the thermal UMPPs that is being worked out. And as per the mandate that has been given, we have to work on the clearances and all, and before we go for the bidding as well. So those things are being worked out, and once things are in place, we may come out for bidding of UMPPs. But yes, in case of renewable, as on date, we have not got any mandate from Government of India for development of any renewable UMPPs. And if we get one, that won't be an issue in developing. We can do that. That's not an issue. And the second question, that the interest rate, it's a dynamic process that we have been adopting, and we have been working on interest rate. And as per the recent notified interest rate, we have brought it down. And MCLR, if it goes, our lending rates are not linked to MCLR, but we are looking at the market conditions, and it's certainly aligned with the market conditions. So it's a continuous process. It's not that lending rates are fixed for us. We keep looking into it, and as per the market requirement, we do that. That's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The second question is for, I think, Mr. Banerjee. It is related to the DISCOM sector. which one of the participants, Mr. Rahul Saxena, says, how can the receivable position of the INR 1.2 lakh crore can be addressed?
Sir, as Mr. Jani touched upon that topic, DBT, if introduced, it will bring in transparency and real-time subsidy funding into the sector. Real-time funding of subsidy is very essential. Otherwise, it's a promise made by the powers that I will do this, I will do that without funds being available. It's a gimmick. It's a political gimmick. That's not sustainable. So that is one aspect. The other is that all DISCOMs must have a loss reduction trajectory which should be honestly implemented, not in Excel sheet on the ground. So high loss distribution transformers have to be found out by energy audit practices. All these things are available. All these tools are available. So there are pockets of excellence in these sectors, and IT support is also available. So once these things are honestly adopted, the losses and cash gaps will come down. And the other thing is, cost effective tariff should be given on a timely basis by the state regulators, as has been pronounced by the APTEL in 11/11/11 suo motu order. So that will go a long way in helping the sector to be financially viable and healthy.
Okay. Okay. I think one more question is there from the again DISCOM side. I think I would request Mr. Jani to take it. One of the audience, Mr. Abhijit Datta, is asking if privatization of DISCOM in India is ever at all fully possible.
Yes, so I think it is possible, and it may probably happen in the immediate future. So it's not just privatization of the existing DISCOMs, but the regulation that is lying in the parliament, which would now probably be debated in the winter session, is to allow competition into each and every DISCOM circle. So there would be, and at the same time, well, the state DISCOM can also, the state government can also decide to sell off their or privatize the DISCOM, some DISCOM circles that they have. But most likely, it can happen in the near future, and we will see a lot of depth in the electricity market with more franchises and competition coming up in each and every DISCOM circle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think I would take one more last question because we are running out of time. I think it is again for Mr. Sinha. Mr. Sinha, one of the audience is asking, are the lenders ready for financial closure of debt for implementation of FGD even before regulatory approval for the project costs of FGD is in place?
Yeah, as far as financial closure is concerned, there is okay, we can do that. But of course, our fund will start flowing into the project only if you have a regulatory clearances, because that will only reflect the tariff part. That is why the financial model will come into picture, because until unless there is a pass-through, I don't think it's a viable project. So we'll have to look into that. So financial closure is just a sanction that can be achieved, but fund flow disbursement will happen only if this clarity is there that there will be a pass-through. Because with this, the existing tariff, it is difficult for us to go ahead with that. And regarding one point that I wanted to make was that as Mr. Jani had mentioned earlier, that the direct payment of subsidy to the consumers, I wanted to highlight that it is something which is coming up very soon, and it will be there as per the new amendment which is coming up in Electricity Act. As far as privatization of distribution companies are concerned, that is also going ahead. Very soon you will see Chandigarh as a private owned distribution company. So UTs are going ahead.
Thanks a lot. So I think, Sudhir, I mean, we are sort of done with questions then, because we are also quite overrun in terms of time. So you know, with this, we will sort of end this session. And my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Sinha, Mr. Lalit Jain, Mr. Juvendra Jani, and Mr. Banerjee for taking out time and attending this panel discussion. It was a very interesting discussion in terms of the answers that came through. Really interesting, and I'm thankful for your openness and the candidness in terms of answering all the questions. My heartfelt thanks to all the attendees who took out time to listen to this webinar. After the webinar is over, you will receive an email in terms of asking for a feedback. Please revert back on that. With that, we will end this. Thanks a lot. Have a good evening ahead. Thank you. Okay, then. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Sudhir, you may end, please. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.